Hello and welcome to CPIT 490 Lab 5. In this lab we will learn how to install and configure a web application, and we will take WordPress as an example. WordPress is a popular content management system, or CMS, and we will be installing it on two different virtual machine instances. The first instance will hold the web server and the environment that is needed to run WordPress. That includes PHP and any other modules or libraries. The second instance will host the database server. That's, in our case, will be MySQL or MariaDB. So the first step in this lab is to create your VM instances. So we need two instances. The first one will be the web server instance, and the second one will be the DB instance. Okay, we also need to create external disks and mount them attach them and then mount them for each instance. So if I go to the cloud provider, my cloud provider dashboard, and then create the instance there. So select OS only and pick the OS as CentOS, and make sure you attach or add your SSH key. So that's the one we created in the previous labs. So I will name this one as select just the cheapest instance for this example. So I will name this one as the web server instance, and then create that instance. Okay, I also need to create another instance similarly, and that's gonna be the DB instance. Okay, so create, and then we also need to create our storage. Okay, so disk, so create disk. Okay, so disk, so let's call this one web server disk 1, and then create disk. Make sure you're creating your disk in the same zone. Okay, and then attach it to the instance. So we have the web server instance, and attach that instance, right? So now we have created the one instance and the disk for that instance. We need to create another disk. So let's call it the DB disk 1. Create. Okay, and then attach it to the DB instance. Alright, so next is we need to go and access our web server instance, okay, and mount these disks. Alright, so now I need to access these two instances using SSH. So if I go to the first instance, the web server instance, and copy the public IP address and then SSH on my terminal, give it SSH -I and the path to your private key, and then username at the public IP address. Okay, enter your passphrase if you did not save that into your keychain. Need to do the same thing for the DB instance. Okay, so I opened another tab on my terminal and do SSH -I .ssh and the path to the private key, username at the public IP address. Confirm if it's your first time to access this, and again type your passphrase. So now I am on both instances. Okay, so the next step in this lab is to mount these external disks, right? So we have two external disks that are attached into each VM instance from the dashboard of your cloud provider. So if I go ahead and run the command ls block, we can see that we have our root directory. This is the operating system. The OS disk is 20 gig and it's mounted onto the root. This is the root point of your file system. We have an external disk, or our data disk, that we need to mount. Its name is xvdf on this one, and the size of it is 8 gig, and it's not mounted. Okay, it's attached but it's not mounted. Alright, so to mount that device, we first need to determine whether the disk has been formatted or not, okay, before we attempt formatting it. Alright, so to do that, we use the command sudo file -s and then the path to the device. Okay, so the path is it's actually always starts with div. Okay, so it's always in the div directory. So you go root div and then you type the name that you see right here, so xvdf. Okay, so if you run it, if you get this output, this means the device or the disk is not formatted. Okay, so we need to format this disk. Okay, so make sure that you only run the following command only when you see this output. Okay, it says data. If it says anything else, especially with a file system like x4 for example, then you shouldn't be formatting that disk, otherwise you're gonna risk losing your entire data. Okay, so to format this disk, we run the command sudo make file system. The type is x4 and the device name in our case is xvdf. Okay, xvdf, this one right here. Okay, so format it. Okay, and now if I run the same command that I did, the sudo file -s, if I pump the font a little bit, you can see that I'm getting the file system type as extension 4. Okay, so I need to do the same. If I do ls block, I still don't see the disk as mounted, so I need to create a mounting point. Okay, a directory to hold our external disk. Okay, so I created a disk with make directory -p mnt root mnt disk -1. Okay, so if I do it, next is I need to mount the device. So to mount it, you do sudo mount and then you give it the path to the device, so it's xvdf, and then you give it the mounting point. So pass that disk -1. Okay, now if I do ls block, I'll be able to see it mounted onto this mounting point. Okay, so we'll do the same thing, the same step that I did on the database instance, really quick. So if I do this, like you can see there's ls block. Okay, it's the same name xvdf, so and it's not formatted. Okay, so I need to format it with the same command that I used to format this disk. Okay, so just copy this command and run it on the DB instance. Okay, so now if I do sudo file -s, it will show the file system, but ls block, it will not show the that the device is mounted. So we need to create a mounting point. So make dir -p mnt disk1, okay, and then mount the device, okay, div xvdaf, and then mnt disk1. Okay, now if I do ls block, I should be I should see that the external data disk is mounted on this directory. Okay, so that's how you mount and format these data disks. Alright, so next is we need to install the database. In our case it's MariaDB. So MariaDB is not available in the default CentOS repositories. So if we go to sudo yum install MariaDB, you're probably not going to see it. So to add it, we need to add, basically to install it, we need to add it manually to the repositories. Okay, so if I do sudo, so we need a text editor before that. So we need a text editor on this machine. So if you're not familiar with Vim, you can use you might find Nano, the text editor, much easier to work with. So if we install it, sudo yum -y install Nano, and then do the same thing on the other instance. Okay, so if I open or create a new file on etc yum.repos.d and then name it mariadb.repo nano. Okay, and I'm just going to copy and paste from the link to this lab, so that's will be available in the description, below in the description. So if I save this one, okay, now I can simply install the database client and the server. Okay, so sudo yum -y to confirm yes for all messages, install MariaDB server and MariaDB client. Okay, so now it should install MariaDB version 10 as you see right here. Okay, so it's probably going to take a little bit of time considering the size of this small instance that I just installed, so that's why probably taking a while to complete. So once done, we need to start the database server with system control. So we do sudo system control start MariaDB, and that should start the server. Okay, so once started, now we need to change the database directory from the default one into a directory in our external disk. So to do that, first I need to stop the database. So stop it, and then after that, just make sure if you're not sure if it's running or not, you can do sudo Maria system control status, and then MariaDB, and you should see that the status for it is stop right here. MariaDB server is down. Okay, so we can, before we make any changes to the config files and changing the actual data directory. Okay, so I need to create a new directory for our database files. So do make directory mount in disk1, and I'm gonna call it db data. Next, we need to change the owner of that directory into the default user and group that runs MySQL or MariaDB. So the default user is MySQL and the group is MySQL as well. To the mount disk1 and then db data. So next is to edit the config file for MySQL. etc my.cnf with the text editor, of course. Okay, and then we need to add a directive for the server. So probably going to add this, not here, probably this is the default one, so it just imports something right here, etc my config.d. so probably going to look inside that directory, so sudo nano and then etc config.d, look for server, probably this one, server.cnf. okay, so server.cnf, open that in your text editor, and this is for the MySQL daemon. Yeah, so for the line, just right after the line that starts with MySQL d, add the lines to your data directory and your socket file. Okay, so this is will tell it where to create those two things. So I'm gonna paste those files. So we'll create our data directory under db data, the directory that we just created, and change the owner of that directory, and then under it there's MySQL, where we'll save all the database data, and this is the socket for communicating with this database server, okay, in the same directory. Alright, so we need to do this, and then we need to do save. Okay, so once saved, we need to edit the client directory. So the client, if we go to MySQL d client.cnf, and right under client we need to tell it the port number for the client 3306, that's the default one, and then we need to tell it the socket that we just created, so that way when we access the client, both are communicating over this socket, using this socket. Alright, so save this, Control X, and then yes. Okay, and then we need to go ahead and copy the previous data directory, okay, using the command cp -a for archive, okay, to this data db data directory, okay, under MySQL. Okay, so copy this whole thing into the new directory. Alright, so once copied, next step is to do some security related settings for the SE Linux. Okay, if you're using SE Linux, we need to set the security context to the data directory. So to do that, we run this command. Okay, and then we need to also run another command to disable or to set the context of that SE Linux related settings. Alright, so the next step is to do sudo system control start MariaDB, start MariaDB. So, and then we need to access the database server using the MySQL client with the root user and -p for the password, which is usually blank. So just hit enter. It says cannot connect to local MySQL server, so probably need to restart the server. Sudo system control restart MariaDB, and then try again. Okay, cool. So I need to double check and make sure that the data directory is the one that we created, so that so I do select at data dir, run it, and yes, it points to the data directory that we created. Okay, so exit the client, and that's how you install MariaDB on the DB instance. So next step is to install the web server Apache HTTPD on the web server instance. Okay, so make sure you switch to the web server instance. If you're not there, make sure you do SSH. So to install it, we're gonna use the yum install package manager for CentOS. So yum -y install HTTPD. Okay, so we need to create a data directory. Similarly, make directory disk and then name it ww. Okay, change the owner to the default one that runs Apache. That's typically Apache. And then ww for the directory. Okay, so we change the owner. Next is we need to edit the config files. So sudo nano etc httpd conf and then httpd.conf. Okay, so we need to go to the server root. Okay, or not the server root, the document root. So the document root, so scroll till you find the document root. Okay, so this section right here, so we need to change this line where it says document root to the directory that we just created. Okay, so it's mount disk 1 ww. Okay, do the same thing right here. Okay, and then we also need to do it to the default when it says further relax access to the default document root. So make sure you change that one as well to the new directory. So mount disk 1 dub. Okay, and then Control X and then save it. So we change that into 3 directory. Okay, so right now the default config file will point into the directory that we just created. Okay, so after that we need to do some SA Linux security. We need to disable some of the security and related setting for SE Linux. So we run this command, and then we also need to run the set SE bool command. Okay, HTTP can network connect on, right? So once we run that, we need to start the Apache server. So do system control and then start HTTPD. Okay, so that will start the server. Alright, so next is to install PHP on the web server instance. So you need to run this command, and again the link to the lab is in the description. Okay, all the commands and the steps to follow this tutorial. So run another command to install PHP, and then we need to install also yum utils, okay, to configure PHP. So sudo yum -y install yum utils, and then we need to install PHP config files, or the RAMI PHP 7.2. okay, okay, and then we need to do sudo yum install for PHP 7.2 PHP and PHP MySQL, the modules that we need, and PHP GD, which is needed to upload things into files into WordPress. Okay, so install that. Okay, so check that PHP 7 is installed. So PHP -v, okay, and it says 7.2.11. okay, so as long as 7.2 or above, it should be fine for WordPress, right? So next is to install and download and install WordPress. So we'll use curl to download the file. We need to use the -l option and to follow the redirect, okay, and download this file. So download it to the current working directory, the present working directory, and then we need to extract it. So if I do ls, you should see the file has been downloaded. So extract it tar xvzf to the latest. Okay, so once that is done, we need to move this file into the directory that we created. Okay, so if I do ls, you see that we have WordPress, the directory. So I need to move that one or copy it. So sudo cp-a to preserve all the permissions and file ownerships of that directory. So -av, and then just the file permissions that we care about, that we want to keep for WordPress. So we're going to copy everything there, and then we need to put that into our root document directory for the Apache HTTP server. Okay, so copy that. Okay, so once that is copied into mount disk, then www. Okay, so you can see the content. So the issue with this right now is the directory ownership is still belong to the CentOS, but remember, Apache web server runs using the runs by the Apache user and the group Apache, so we definitely need to change that. Okay, but before that, I want to create a directory for WordPress to store all uploads. So when someone uploads a file into WordPress, then we want to have a special directory for that, so just create that directory. Okay, so it says not so okay, so we need to do not WordPress, just wp content. Okay, and then uploads. Okay, so created that directory, and then we need to change now the owner of that directory to the Apache web server. Okay, sudo change owner -r recursively Apache mnt disk dub. Okay, so change the owner of everything in that directory, and then that's basically downloads and install WordPress. Okay, next step is to go there and change the config file. So if I go to the directory mount disk, then www, I should see a sample config file that says wp config sample.php. So I wanna copy that file into a directory, okay, or just rename it, okay, or copy it. So if I just copy that file into the directory, into a new file called wp-config.php, okay, and then open that into your text editor. So sudo, you need to use sudo because that file is owned by a different user, the Apache user right now, and your user is probably different than that. So sudo nano, and then open that wp-config and .php. Okay, so open that into your directory, and we need to change the database name and all of these default things for the configs for the database. Okay, so make sure you change that into whatever you wanna do. So in my case, I'm gonna just put wp-db for the database, and the username I'm going to put wp user. Okay, password, change the password into something, you're probably in production going to use something more complex than this, but this is just for this exercise. So I'm gonna call it WP password. You can pick your favorite password, 1 2 3 4 5 6 if you want. Alright, so DB password, okay, and then I wanna get the local host. Okay, so to obtain the host name is not localhost. The host name is the IP address of this instance right here. Okay, so I'm going to use the private IP address for this instance. Okay, so this is the private IP address that is not open to the public. Okay, so I'm going to use this just exact IP address. I'm not going to use the public IP address for this one. So I'm going to use the private IP address. Okay, so we need to use dots for the valid IP address. Okay, so that would make it the default or the private IP address for your instance. Okay, if you are not sure, you can go to the dashboard and make sure that you have the correct IP address. Okay, you can obtain that from the dashboard of your cloud provider. Okay, so once you do that, save these settings. Okay, so I'm gonna do Control O. Okay, and then enter. Okay, so that one is saved. Next is I need to go to the DB instance and access the instance and create a database with all these names and values that I put in this config file. So I go to the DB instance here, and then I access the database. Okay, hit enter. Okay, you need to create a new database with the same name that you used there. Okay, so if I do create database WP and DB, okay, so once I created the database, I need to use it. Okay, so use WPDB, hit enter. Now you are going to affect that database. Okay, and next is I need to create a user. Okay, remember we put the user name here as WP user, so we need to create a user for that database, okay, with the same password value that you specified. Okay, so create a user. Okay, and then once that user is created, we need to grant privileges to the new user, but we need to obtain the private IP address for that instance. Okay, for the web server instance. Okay, so if I go here, okay, I need to grant access to that user. Okay, the WP user is going to be accessing, or is going to access this database from the web server instance. Okay, so the web server instance is this guy right here. Okay, so if I exit this one, this is the IP address. Okay, and again you can get this private IP address from the from the dashboard of your cloud provider. Okay, so make sure you type here a valid IP address. That's the private IP address of your web server instance. Okay, so run this one, and next we need to flush these privileges so that way they take effects. Okay, so I will flush these privileges so that way we can access the database. WordPress can access the database from the web server instance. Okay, so now I can do exit. Okay, and the next step is I need to configure or complete the installation through the web interface. So I need to access the web browser and complete the installation of WordPress. Alright, so we need to go to the public IP address of the web server instance. So I go to my dashboard and go to the web server instance and copy this public IP address, and then type it in the URL and go to wp-admin, okay, directory. So hit enter. Okay, and now you should see the installation welcome screen. Okay, so you need to set the title for your blog or your WordPress site. So CPIT 490, I'm gonna put, okay, pick a username and password, okay, that you can remember. Okay, and then type any email address, okay, for your email. Okay, I'm just not gonna use any email here. Okay, so and then confirm the use of a weak password. Okay, it's just for testing. In production environment, you're probably going to use something like a password manager with a strong password to generate and remember that complex password. Okay, so hit install or click on install, and then you need to log in as an admin to complete the installation. Okay, so admin, and then the same password that I put, log in. Okay, so now you are on the dashboard of your WordPress site. Okay, So you can start writing post. Okay, so you can click on add a new. Okay, and then you can start writing your post. And then change the status from the draft. Okay, so the status is a draft. So probably if you want to publish it, you can save it as a draft. If you want to publish it, then you hit publish. Okay, so that way if I go to the website using the public IP address, okay, if I put it here, then I should be able to see the post that I just put. Okay, so CPIT 490, that's the website, and this is the post that I just put. Okay, so this concludes lab 5. Could have fun with WordPress and explore all the other options of this content management system. The end, make sure that you clean up resources and delete your VM instances. Okay, so you don't want to get charged for these things. Okay, and unless you really want to use it. Okay, so if I go to the dashboard of my cloud provider, I could just stop these instances and just delete them. Okay, so I go to the database instance and stop it. Okay, and then I could just go ahead and delete each instance once it's stopped. Okay, also make sure that you delete your data disks if you do not need them. Okay, so delete this disk. Okay, you can't delete it if it's still being used. Okay, so waiting for that instance to get completely stopped, and then I will hit delete and delete for each instances, and then I will go to the storage and make sure that you delete these disks that you do not use, otherwise you'll be charged for that for these services.